Yeah, so my name is Alexander Soloviev. I'm an American researcher here at the University of Ljubljana. I'm a Marie Sklodowska-Curie fellow. My main field of research is theoretical physics with a focus towards high energy physics, in particular understanding conceptual issues around heavy ion collisions. I've been in Ljubljana now for 2 years, and yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. Currently, I'm interested in understanding novel approaches to understanding collective phenomenon. And by that, I mean how systems evolve over time in a cohesive way. So this would involve things like hydrodynamics, fluid flows. And what's beautiful about it is in heavy ion collisions, in collider physics, it's unexpected that hydrodynamics would be a theory that could be applicable because the energies are so high, things are happening so fast, that it's not expected that it should flow like our everyday liquids. But the beauty of studying such things is that you can then look at all sorts of systems, like in condensed matter, in cosmology, and the same mathematical framework applies also to those systems. So I'm kind of interested in a wide scope in that direction. That's an interesting question. I mean, definitely in terms of my imagination, the thing that's been the most stimulating has been the work in cosmology in terms of gravitational waves of binary black hole mergers. I mean, we're living kind of in a unique age after 60 years or so. I mean, since Schwarzschild, like 100 years of discovering black hole solution general relativity. We're now actually getting real experimental evidence, and we're able to even take these photos of the black hole in the center of our galaxy. So for me, this is really stimulating because the mathematics of general relativity is something that I also use in my everyday research. And yeah, so I find that extremely beautiful. So I do use AI for, not in my research to produce results, but I use AI for instance, cleaning up phrasing, or kind of the same way that I would use Wikipedia or Googling. So kind of the initial approach to a field that I'm not familiar with, but I don't want to sound too negative, but it's still very much like, I think Wikipedia is a really good equivalency because for me, Wikipedia is extremely useful as a first port of research, as a first stop, where you kind of see a general picture of the field or of the idea that you want to understand, but then you must go on and look at primary sources. You need to talk to other researchers. You need to talk to your colleagues to understand better what you're trying to study, because it's, for now, it can hallucinate, and I wouldn't trust it so much in terms of producing high-level results. Oh, and another important thing that I use AI for is for coding, because in particular syntax. So I code I mean, I use like Mathematica, for instance. This is very standard in theoretical physics. But if I want to program something in C or Python, these are things that I use a bit less frequently. But the programming language, the actual logic, is the same. I mean, the mathematics is the same, but it's just, do you use braces or semicolons or commas or parentheses and things like this? That changes from language to language. So it's kind of nice to have AI. If I say I want to code a particular thing, it's able to provide for me the documentation necessary to implement rapidly code in a different language. I would say so, yeah. I kind of liken it to a calculator. So I know that there's a big discussion about using artificial intelligence in school for younger people. But when I was growing up, which now I realize is quite a long time ago, technologically speaking, but I had math class, and in my math class, we had exams that were with a calculator, and we had a math class without a calculator. And the reason why you had without a calculator is you needed to show that you yourself contain at least the conceptual understanding of how to do certain computations. But you had exams with a calculator because you knew at the end of the day you were going to be in the real world. And nowadays we have calculators in our pockets. I mean, we have computers everywhere. So it's also good to be literate with numerical methods. I think AI in that sense is very much like a tool that should be, we don't know, I don't think, I don't have the answer certainly, and I don't know if people really have the answer of how to implement this well in pedagogy, but it's something that should be joined into our studies and kind of go well with what people are already studying and how they actually approach knowledge information gathering. I think it's a very topical question that you ask. But a very common feature of research is which I think is both good and bad, is there's a big emphasis on internationalism. So for instance, you're essentially, in most nations, in most places, you're essentially required to leave your home institution. This is done for very good reasons, because if you always stay in the same institution working with the same people, you don't necessarily develop new ideas. You maybe lead to more leaning on intellectual orthodoxy. So leaving is a good way to, first of all, even encounter new research domains that you might have not thought were interesting or possible before. But on the other hand, what it means is that every 2 years you need to leave your country, your friends, and this is difficult from a psychological perspective, and that's also not possible then for everybody. A career in this direction, even though I think people who are very creative without having to travel can still produce really good results and still be very valuable members of the research community. But kind of the idea now is you need to leave, you need to travel far and wide, and this also due in part because the job market is very complicated in academia. There's an overproduction of extremely qualified people to do research, which is good for larger economically and in the industrial sector, because then these people can be retrained and applied to other economic directions. So maybe there's some benefits, maybe there's some flaws. And yeah, as an American researcher, I could say that nowadays it's very complicated, the situation in the United States, as probably you guys are following. And maybe there's some correction in this direction away from just letting as many international people travel and do their research where they want to and where they're invited to. Yeah, it's a really, it's a very difficult question, and I don't know if I'm quite the right person to speak on this topic, but I think we're kind of witnessing now a decoupling in some sense of the world order. So between, for instance, the recent wars between Ukraine and Russia and the worsening situation between China and the United States, a lot of people, and also current funding questions, NIH and NSF funding sources in the United States, there's a lot of cuts, there's a lot of breaking of research ties between nations. This is difficult for me to witness because I view science as kind of a diplomatic bridge, a way to speak between different cultures. It's also, bizarrely, I have optimism that maybe this means that there will be more funding in science in some weird way if people start funding their own national agencies better, as it was. I mean, one of the positives, maybe, if you could say so, of the Cold War was there was a very, at least in my view, there was a lot of great scientific output that came out. A lot of it were for terrible reasons, but nonetheless, there was a lot of investment in basic science and foundational methods. And actually, as a field, theoretical physics really developed greatly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, to no small part due to large funding initiatives from the United States and the USSR. So I am pessimistic maybe in the short term, and hopefully in the long term, it still means that nations will understand what's important and will fund basic science research further. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Short-term view, pessimistic. Long-term, optimistic. Yes. So I've just submitted a few grants to stay here in Slovenia. So I will wait to see the results of that. I'm applying for some permanent positions elsewhere in Europe, and I'm trying to see what's going on in the hiring regime in the United States. It's not clear right now how scientific funding will be managed there for the foreseeable future. But otherwise, it's to continue doing research. It's continue to being here in Ljubljana, and yeah, I've actually just applied to be habilitated as an assistant professor. So maybe in 6 months I'll have some good news. So let's see about that. Fingers crossed. And yeah, to enjoy the summer in the short term. How big are we talking? Because
How big can you think?
I mean, I think that I'm very interested in, and I think a lot of good people are interested in, is trying to understand the any sort of possible tests of quantum gravity or signatures of quantum gravity. So there are people, I also have worked in these kind of more theoretical directions like string theory and stuff like this. And those are really great theoretical models for possible theories of quantum gravity. I think that there's a lot, like, also my wife is a mathematician, shout out to her. But talking to her, it seems like there's a lot of mathematical models, and it's hard to know what corresponds to reality. And I think a very important question would be really clean signatures of quantum gravity, be that by the horizons of black holes that we're currently just beginning to unravel, be that in tabletop experiments of cold atoms, if we could measure some entanglement properties that are for instance, in a gravitational field. I think that would be really important because that would kind of put in stone the major tension that's in theoretical physics between the standard model, which is essentially formulated in a flat background with no gravity, or no need to talk about gravity, and general relativity, which is essentially an entirely classical theory. And also there's also quantum mechanics, which I mean is the basis also within the standard model, which is a quantum field theory. So how to actually link all of these questions together is extremely complicated, and I think that's really the kind of fruitful direction. It's one of these theories has to give way to the other possibly, or there's some fusion which we haven't even seen. And for me, that would be really exciting, and hopefully I make a small contribution in that direction, but I'm not so braggadocious or optimistic. I can answer the second part of that question. Certainly AI is changing the world. I won't say for the better or for the worse, but you definitely see it being implemented at essentially every facet of communication or software that most people deal with. I mean, I see it now also in WhatsApp, which is kind of strange for me. But okay, there's AI is kind of infiltrating all aspects of our lives. I don't know if this is necessary or necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I think AI research is something that is certainly it's in its early days in terms of, not in terms of the research on AI, but in terms of the technological implementation in other research fields. But I was talking with my colleagues yesterday, and we kind of were saying that an underutilized aspect of AI is that in a lot of fields, people are asking very similar questions, but we have very different mathematical models. We have different physical constraints or physical settings. So for us as just people, we have our biases. It's hard to get past those and see that maybe questions that people have, like that we're asking now in our field, have already been answered in other fields decades before, but just because of a language barrier, and not English to German or whatever, but really in a language of mathematical symbols or partial differential equations, something like this. Maybe what AI can do that could be really, which I don't think has been done yet, but take the vast volume of literature and actually try to make connections between different fields. And that could be a really useful knowledge discovery engine. So that hasn't been really exploited yet. I'm very cautious to say whether AI can, I don't know how creative it can be in terms of new discovery. Possibly this can happen. Maybe there are new ideas that can be pulled out faster through the implementation of some artificial intelligence. That would possibly put everybody out of a job if AI can think for all of us. But at least from an immediate perspective, I see like there's a lot of use that AI can have in research for being a support vehicle for doing research faster, doing coding better, and kind of in that direction. Yeah. So I have a niece who's 7, so it's a little early so to tell her what to study. She's still figuring out what her interests are. And I have another niece who's even younger, so she's not even in kindergarten yet. But what I would say, so maybe when I was growing up, there was definitely a push to learn to code. That was kind of the default narrative is you learn to code, you'll find a very good job. It seems like that's less the case now in this immediate moment. Maybe this will pick up again. But what I think is universal is the study of mathematics. This certainly is something that any coder, like anybody who wants to work in tech or in software development, mathematics is something that's it takes a very long time to learn, to do it very well. And it's good when you start at a younger age, and when you get mathematically literate, programming is just an expression of that mathematical knowledge. So it's easier to teach a mathematician how to program than the other way around, in my opinion. So that's my personal kind of bias. Also study physics because it's wonderful to learn about the natural world, as well as learning mathematics. Kind of that's the reason why I study these things. But I also think that that's just a very narrow view of mine from a scientific perspective. I think understanding how the world works, so understanding history, diplomacy, languages, these things, even though AI can supplement this and actually even surpass our understanding, I think at the end of the day, I hope at the end of the day, my optimism, my long-term optimism, is that humans will still be the ones in charge and still making decisions. And so for people to actually be able to make these decisions, they need to understand the humanistic, the social sciences behind the decision-making that we do. And I think that that's also very worthwhile of study and pursuit. Like, how do you critically think? How do you approach problems in a collective manner with other people nearby? And how we can live in a society and better it as individuals or as a collective.